Hello and welcome. As the title suggests, in this video we'll be chatting about fixing tiny imperfections when you're using black resin. I have a selection of different products that I normally use. Just for a clarification, we are discussing fixing tiny little holes when it is quite cold outside. In UK now it is anything between -5 and +3. So typical applications of resin or timber glue would probably not work because it will just not cure. So let's kick off with this epoxy putty stick made by Mohawk. Next one in the line will be soft stick by Libron, followed on by a raft of low viscosity super glue with activator. And I'm mixing, following Ian's advice, star bond with this bond lol, and it's a mix ratio of 1:1, and apparently it's the best combination of the two. And I'm using this activator of eBay. And the last product is hard stick. Yes, the obvious solution would be to heat up the shed. And yes, that is in the cards. I'm going to sort it this week. Let's kick off with soft stick. And I have to say, it's a bit of a hit and miss process. On that occasion, it took me a few goes before it was actually properly applied and it disappeared. So I'm applying the product, then I used 240 grit sandpaper to take the excess off. In the process, of course, I managed to scratch resin, as you can see. So all the resin will later on need to go through the normal process. At this stage, resin is sanded to 600 grit, so any sanding of lower grit will be visible, it will scratch. But after this application, you can still see this tiny hole, so it will need to be redone. So after applying the soft stick again, I'm hitting this with a oscillating sander instead of doing this by hand. And the result is disappointing. So we'll have to go through the process again. And again, you can see this annoying hole popping up. So let's do it again. Third application, and again hitting with sander. And hopefully a few seconds later, it will all disappear and will be nice. After a few goes, I managed to slightly improve my technique, and on some occasions I managed to have a good result after 1 or 2 applications. So, for example, on that occasion, I applied it once and it managed to cover all the little holes, fill them up, fill the voids, and when I applied the sander, it then took it out completely, left enough in each hole so that the final result was satisfactory. Some of the bigger holes I tried to fill up with CA glue, but I wasn't always happy. However, the holes that were close to the edge of the timber, I found it a better result to actually make them even bigger, enlarge them, and then fill them up with dust from sanding of the same piece of timber so that the color should match. So I'm taking out my Makita Orbit sander, and as you can see, I'm just taking all the dust collected from it. Now I'm filling up the void, and it could be done just by applying this by finger, which will be absolutely fine. Remove the excess, and once the excess is removed, I just top it up again. I wasn't happy with the volume, just to make it slightly proud so that it will be sticking above the surface. And I'm using my magic mixture of starboard and the other low viscosity super glue. Application of super glue followed up by top up of sawdust. If possible, I try to remove glue as well so that there will be less sanding in the next stage of the filling up. The only downside of using this super glue with your fingers is that effectively it will just stick to your fingers and then you lose option to unlock your phone with the thumb reader. But anyway, that's not the end of the world. Now I'm applying quite probably too much of the activator just to speed up the process. And a few seconds later, it's good to go to heat it with chisel. And I know it's not fully cured, which is absolutely fine. So I'm using the chisel to take out the bulk of the glue and the buildup of the dust. After sanding, I'm quite happy with the outcome. By magic, this hole disappears and the final outcome looks pretty decent. So it's a good solution to solve it. You can barely see where the hole was. So moving on, I use CA glue for application that I want to fill up the holes that could potentially be with sharp edges or any other filler would not nicely penetrate. So you can see tiny little bubbles popping up from the glue when it penetrates the timber and the timber soaks it up, and I just need to top it up a little bit with the CA glue. So this is a really nice and neat solution to get it fixed. Then apply it again too much of the activator, hence that white foamy cover popped up, which I need to sand off and initially use the chisel just to scrape it off because it's quite thick, maybe not couple of mil, but let's say a millimeter-ish thick. Once sanded, you can't really tell which one is original, which one is man-made. But now let's play a little game. So, question is, we'll have 3 different holes that I have filled up. One of the 3 is original, natural, and the other 2 I have made. So, which one is it? 1, 2, or 3? And the answer is the natural hole is number 2. So I've made number 1 and number 3. I'm happy with number 1. Number 3 probably could have been slightly better. Now, moving on to the hard wax. I'm using my soldering iron to heat it up. It's really easy to apply, just a tiny droplet. In my shed it's quite cold, so I don't need anything to cool it down. You can see the color changing as it cools down. It gets a little bit more matte, and within seconds it's rock solid. I'm using this 9005, which is a indication of the color. Then I use the chisel to remove the excess, and this one is so much easier to remove than CA glue. It's way softer and it's much easier to remove. Then after, of course, sanding off, I wipe it off and by magic it's gone. So I'm happy with this hard wax as well. So that's how the table looks like after filling up all the little voids and holes. That is one little imperfection that I'm unhappy with. However, it's only visible in one direction when someone is very closely looking at the sun or the light is bouncing off. It has just slightly different texture, hence if you're really looking closely you might be able to spot it, but otherwise it's good to go. So happy days. I am using acetone to remove any excess dust, which reveals how actually the timber and the resin will look underneath. And after applying a few different options of CA glue, hard wax, soft wax, I'm quite pleased with the outcome. The slab is looking pretty decent, so the next phase will be to sand off up to the higher grade the resin, and then of course to apply all the finishing coats of rubber monocoat. But this will come probably in a couple of days' time. Next one on the list is Mahawk wood filler, but let's see what the expert has to say about it. John Molecki, for you.
Not a consumable, but I still consider it in like the tool bucket. These are epoxy sticks. They're epoxy putty sticks specifically made by Mohawk. And these things are fantastic. I've come to love them. Now, what they are is a little tube of 2-part epoxy that you can pinch a piece off and roll it between your fingers. This is great for filling bug holes. This is great for filling gaps. This is great in a pinch For most applications, you got to rub it in with your fingers and it can get on you, but I find us around here using these way more than we're using like a 5-minute epoxy for a filler or trying to color match a wood filler just because they're so good. They come in tons of colors and they're readily available all over the internet. I definitely suggest having some of these laying around, and we've had this tube for 2 years, this tube for like 3 or 4 years, and this tube for about 4 years as well. They're 20 bucks a tube, totally worth having around the shop. Check them out.
So I have checked it out, and yes, it is a really good product, really easy to apply. You can pinch a tiny bit for the amount you need, and it's really easy to apply, really easy to sand off. The biggest headache is, unfortunately, if you are looking after something really black to match your black epoxy, you won't get it. So be mindful, if it's the black you're after, look elsewhere. However, when you have time and the temperature is within the temperature range of resin, probably the best solution is just to apply a translucent coat initially to protect the timber from staining, and then go with just the black resin on top of it to fill up all the cracks and voids. And this, in my experience, gets the best result. Once the resin is hardened, which can take a couple of days, I usually heat it with a belt sander to take the bulk of it, and then follow up with fine sandpaper to finish it off. So probably this is my best solution to tackle tiny imperfections and voids and cracks. However, it's not always feasible if you don't have enough time or the temperature is outside of the temperature recommended for the resin. However, if you are working with non-porous timber or not absorbing as much, you can risk it and just go with black resin direct. And my little helper came to inspect the quality of the work. So going back to this one, this is an example when I just used black epoxy just to fill up the voids direct. And again, this is probably one of the better solutions instead of going with timber glue or high viscosity CA glue. So if I would have time and decent temperature range, that would be probably the best solution that I would pick. I'm using normally heat gun to soften up resin and then chisel just to take the excess off before I'm using the belt sander in the final phase of taking the excess of resin. Of course, follow up with all the other grids later on. However, I wanted to thank you for watching. If you could subscribe, that would be absolutely amazing. And as a final note, just to cheer you up, as one of the wise guys said, if you would like to inspect and assess the quality of the work, look underneath and just check if the underside of, for example, a dining table is finished to a high level, then you know what quality of workmanship you can expect. One of the guys that I like and I follow is come from Blacktailstudio. Looking at the underside of the slab, you can notice quite a few little tiny holes. And if this is acceptable for $20,000 slab, I'm happy with the quality of my workmanship. This is the top of the coffee table. And again, I just managed to briefly wipe off all the dust. It's of course still unfinished. I need to fine-tune 800,000, 1200 and so on grit to finish off the resin, and then of course apply all the finishes. This is the underside of the big dining table. Again, really pleased with the result. Thank you everyone for watching and see you soon. Thank you. Bye.